The UK riots seem to be over, but what's only just beginning are the arguments for claims and the counterclaims over what the law and the government have done and are still yet to do in response. We've seen characters in the US spreading the idea that the UK is under the grip of some terrible war on free speech, which Prime Minister Keir Starmer is supposed to have brought about practically within hours of taking office. Some of that is distinctly overblown, but we are also seeing the first tests of the 2023 Online Safety Act, which created offences prohibiting the spread of false information. I covered this a bit at the time the legislation was going through. Nobody seemed much interested at that point. However, interest seems to have spiked upwards considerably in just the last few days. So, what's happening? At the time of making this video, there are at least 3 cases ongoing relating to the riots in the context of people who spread false information. The first case involves Bernadette Spofforth, the managing director of a clothing company and a mother of 3. On the day of the attack against children in Southport, she was the first to tweet the supposed name of the attacker, that he was an asylum seeker who came to the UK by boat last year and was on an MI6 watch list. She added, quote, "If this is true, then all hell is about to break loose." As it happened, it wasn't true. But as her fake info was amplified around the internet, all hell broke loose anyway. Spofforth has been arrested and bailed but not yet charged. The offence she's being investigated for is Section 179 of the Online Safety Act, which creates an offence of false communication when a person sends information they know to be false and they intend to cause physical or psychological harm. That makes her case already legally interesting in terms of testing the boundaries of the legislation, since she included the caveat in her tweet, "if this is true." She has now said that she is mortified that the information turned out to be wrong and was spread around like that, and she had repeated the information in good faith, having been told it by someone from Southport, which may be true. There is another context that a court will be interested in that would weigh on the other side of whether it was genuinely passed in good faith or made up, because apparently she has a history of prolific tweeting about anti-vax COVID-19 vaccines, spreading conspiracy theories around World Economic Forum, the Great Reset, so-called climate lockdowns and net zero, and so on. As a result of all that activity, she had been interviewed numerous times on networks such as Talk TV and GB News, and named several times in articles about prominent anti-vax and climate so-called disinfluencers during the last couple of years. So unless you can get a sworn witness statement from a person in Southport verifying that they were the one who she spoke to, a jury could probably easily be persuaded she just habitually makes stuff up. If she did spread it in good faith, where would that fall within the legislation? The Act as drafted does not penalise sending information recklessly or carelessly, for example, believing something to be true without bothering to check before spreading it. Any of us interested in free speech have a keen interest where the courts ultimately will fall on their definition of where that line sits. The second case is Dimitri Stoica, a 25-year-old Romanian national who was live streaming on TikTok on Wednesday, August the 7th, and falsely claimed that he was running for his life from rioters. Police stopped him shortly after his live stream had finished. He later claimed the whole thing was just a joke in order to get more followers. The courts concluded that it was in fact a deliberate attempt to stir up racial hatred and jailed him for 3 months. The third case involves a Birmingham-based rapper known as Twister Cheese, but more conventionally named Omar Abdirizak. He posted a video online claiming that Tommy Robinson had called on people to attack mosques. Robinson responded to this claim on Twitter, saying that he had never called for anyone ever to attack any mosque. That case, which is ongoing at the time of this video, heard statements from his lawyer that he had heard the claim on a podcast and believed it to be factual. So again, contesting the charge on the basis of not knowing that the information shared was false. It remains to be seen how these cases settle out and if others get added to them. But the nature of this process deserves a few additional comments. First, I know enough about how our polarisation works to be clear that precious few, if any, of the people talking about so-called two-tier policing will take the time to notice that these cases span both sides of the divide. I don't think that's particularly the most important part, to be fair, but it's worth noting even so. More to the point is that we see governments now starting to grapple with the most difficult grey space between free speech and incitement to violence and or racial hatred. There are some absolutists who will claim, well, it's easy. There's a straight line that designates just about anything you might say or do as permitted. Full stop. Even those absolutists usually, but not always, accept that actually inciting violence, calling for action against an individual or a group, which has been illegal in most countries, including freedom-loving America, for many years, that, yes, should actually be illegal. But we do have plenty of evidence that genuine disinformation can easily be wrapped in the thinnest layer of plausible deniability to achieve the same outcome. Now, people like me who are minded to be free speech maximisers and people on the other side who you might say are social order maximisers have to grapple with the fact that the current status quo is seeing considerable harms in the real world, along with a whole bunch of people keen to jump on that as an excuse to censor everything that they might not like. And those people are to be found in many places. After all, we saw one such, Thierry Breton, the European Union's Commissioner for Internal Market and Services, who took it on himself to intervene in Elon Musk's interview with Donald Trump this week. Specifically, he sent Musk a letter, which was posted also on Twitter, warning Musk about spreading harmful content ahead of the to-be live-streamed interview, because it might harm people in the EU. If you think about it, that is a pretty extraordinary intervention on the part of a European official in another country's election process. That point wasn't lost entirely on EU officials more generally, who quickly jumped on Breton for not having signed off the letter with the Commission presidency before sending it. One official told the news website Politico, "The EU is not in the business of electoral interference. DSA implementation is too important to be misused by an attention-seeking politician in search of his next big job." A savage burn for sure. Breton made reference in his letter to the recent riots in the UK and the role of social media in spreading disinformation that had made things worse there. So that brings us back to that difficult grey area. Because, of course, in addition to individuals doing their own thing, posting stuff online and getting caught up in the law flexing its muscles, there's also the case of the role that Elon Musk himself has been playing. He, after all, intervened personally in the UK's riot troubles, criticising Keir Starmer personally and amplifying one or two messages, some of which were wholly factually inaccurate, such as the one that pretended to be from the Telegraph newspaper, saying that Keir Starmer was considering building detainment camps on the Falkland Islands, specifically for rioters. Now, Elon Musk deleted that tweet within the hour, but not before it had been seen by almost 2 million people, and he then didn't acknowledge the error in public. Reckless, but not deliberate. That would seem to be the pattern that fits that incident. But we don't know exactly how the courts will draw lines on such defences, and while such a defence might be casually available to random tweeters, can the owner of the company really call on such a benefit of the doubt? Should they not take a little bit more care? And right now, do so time after time, as Elon Musk is doing. The thing is, there is a real issue here about how billionaire owners of important parts of the public square have their power, because power it is, held to account. Musk is the obvious magnet on this because his behaviour is a bit erratic and he treads so lightly into highly disputed territory. But you also have the other big owners, the Zuckerbergs and all those. And the UK legal jeopardy, at least, is not restricted to things that Musk himself posted. One top police inspector said that senior bosses at platforms like Twitter should be held criminally liable if they tolerate harmful material to remain on their platform. And it's not just some crusty old cop who you might suspect doesn't even really know how social media works who is saying so. The former vice president of Twitter's European office also called for Elon Musk to be arrested or sanctioned in the UK for inciting violence. Bruce Daisley, who was at Twitter until 2020, wrote a piece in the UK Guardian calling for Prime Minister Keir Starmer to make an example of Musk by throwing the book at him. And you have increasing numbers of jurisdictions that have laws whereby non-nationals can be held legally accountable for things that they post online, wherever they may be in the world. A point that was driven home this week when the Algerian boxer Imane Khelif, whose previously failed gender test meant that their gold medal victory at the Olympics provoked huge controversy, Khelif has announced a lawsuit for cyberbullying via the French courts against Elon Musk, J.K. Rowling, and potentially a wider field of Twitter posters for tweets condemning Khelif's participation. Anyone who tweeted will be investigated. That will include, according to Khelif's lawyer, Donald Trump. Repercussions for cyberbullying in France can be a prison term between 2 to 5 years. And this is the international legal mess that we are busy wandering into. So you're telling me that US citizens saying things defended at home by the First Amendment, but saying them about international sporting events, the theory is that they could now be prosecuted in France on the basis of contravening French laws of what is permissible speech? It's an interesting legal theory. Does it apply to Afghanistan, Iran, Russia, China, whose laws we might consider wholly at odds with our own values? If not, why not? However, this seems to be a fight that the UK government might be tempted to have with Elon Musk over the riots, that the Algerian government on behalf of their athletes seems to be in the process of starting via the French courts, and it's going to be a very sticky moment of people testing and pushing and scrapping over just how this digital space that can be the source of real-world harms, remember, but also precious hard-won freedoms, how that is all worked out. Where there's any kind of gap, we know someone will test it to destruction. The end result might be that we end up with a group of forthright commentators who have a catalogue of countries that they dare not visit for fear of arrest. It won't mean that they get forcibly extradited to stand trial in those countries, not unless whatever they've done is viewed as a criminal offence in both jurisdictions. It may be that social media platforms become walled gardens, each legal jurisdiction being kept separate so that everyone understands what rules apply within their bit. and no one in the US can be prosecuted for speech that is protected in the US, but then nobody outside the US can see that speech. Or it may be that the various tests thrown at the wall on this one will all fail to stick, as governments end up clarifying their legal statutes to be realistic in terms of what can reasonably be enforced on people outside their own territory. Maybe there's a fourth option you can think of that hasn't occurred to me. If so, post it in the comments below.